Right here with the freezer modular freezing unit. Done a few tests with this setup right now. Quarter horsepower AC compressor running at 119 volts AC. Right now it's pulling about 1.5 amps. Capillary tube restrictor, air-cooled condenser there in the back, and then we have a I don't know, about 88 inches of quarter-inch copper tubing inside of a propylene glycol mix in that beer bucket there, inside of this old thermoelectric refrigerator. I switched from ethylene glycol to propylene glycol because it is less toxic, and I needed a stronger solution. My former solution was giving me some slush up, some freezing, so this is mixed very, very strongly, so I can even operate at about, we're about negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm not getting any slush up in there that I'm aware of. Second value there is subcooling after the condenser, taken directly in the refrigerant line with a thermocouple. The third value is just under 0 degrees Fahrenheit, that is the coolant temperature, and the final value, about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which will quickly come back down since I just opened the door. It took about 2.5 hours to get the air temperature down below freezing. Much of that time was bringing the temperature of the coolant, which is, I don't know, there's probably about 10 pounds of water and propylene glycol in that bucket. I don't know the exact volume. It was operating quite well for those first few hours, just moving a hell of a lot of heat. After that, it brought the air temperature down below freezing, began freezing a few jugs and cans of water that I have in there. I found that the coolant temperature got down well below zero, about negative 8 degrees Fahrenheit. I switched off the compressor because the system just wasn't moving that much heat anymore, and it seemed appropriate to just let the coolth, if you will, of that coolant in the bucket to continue to refrigerate and do some freezing, and it did so for about an hour. It rose from about negative 8 up to about positive 7 degrees Fahrenheit, and maintained the air temperature inside below the freezing point there, usually in the high 20s. So I'm fairly pleased with that. That's the intention, to use the glycol to store some cooling load. I am noticing, and I did expect this, that the evaporator is definitely too small. It operates quite well in higher heat load, moves a lot of heat, but nonetheless, even at that higher heat load, it's the temperature difference between the evaporator, the delta T between the evaporator and the coolant is still relatively large. And right now, you can see there it's 14 degrees or something, which isn't huge, but I am sure that increasing the size of the evaporator and the surface area of the evaporator will allow me to store a little more refrigerant in the low side. You can see we're getting some freeze back here, and maintain higher suction pressure, keep my compression ratio a little bit smaller, increase volumetric efficiency, higher mass flow through the system, move a little more heat more effectively and more efficiently. My next change I'm going to make is to the size of the evaporator. I'm going to at least double the size of the evaporator inside of the bucket there. And if I do so, I should not have to change anything else about the system, the compressor or the capillary tube. Another change I want to make is go for a smaller compressor. This compressor works great. It's quarter horsepower, brings the temperature down very rapidly, but once we get down to these low temperatures, it's really just a lot of overkill. It took about 10 minutes to bring the temperature down here 8 or 9 degrees in the bucket, and I don't see much point in bringing the coolant temperature much lower than it is. I could probably maintain it between about 0 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit to do plenty of effective cooling inside the box. So I'll probably go for a smaller 1/6, 1/10, or even 1/12 horsepower compressor, at which time when I do so, I will probably find that the capillary tube is no longer appropriate, at which point I'll have to change it. So might as well just go with a larger evaporator first, because that a larger evaporator is going to be useful for the smaller compressor. Haven't acquired a smaller compressor, but I'm sure I can find an old junk water cooler or something of that nature that has a very, very small one. Pulling about 1.5 amps at 119 volts. Like I said, it's overkill for what I'm doing here. But during that hour, I with everything off, it continued to cool things down. Don't know how solid that is underneath there, but nope, not very. Just a skin. Just a skin. So you're running a fan in there, getting some frosting on the surface of the bucket, which is not ideal. One note about the refrigerant: we're running barbecue grade propane. I'm gonna go ahead and just shut the compressor off. Fans are still running. See that first value there is suction and subcooling. So you can see it's kind of coming to equilibrium there. You can see that third value is the coolant temperature. It's going to hold pretty damn steady. Final value is the air temperature, which is falling somewhat here. I just opened the door. A note about the refrigerant, the barbecue grade propane. There's a lot of contaminants and stuff in there, water and other refrigerants, but it's the values, the temperature values that I'm taking directly in the refrigerant line stay very, very close to the saturation curve of pure propane. So it's pretty handy. Yes, and again, about the charge. Charge is probably about less than 2 ounces. I don't know exactly. I can charge it whenever I'm doing startup, when the whole thing is warm. However, that doesn't tell me much, because once I get down to these low temperatures, mass flow changes and the amount of heat flux, into the evaporator and out of the condenser changes. So the whole dynamics change, and a refrigerant charge at high temperature is not necessarily appropriate at low temperature, because we have a fixed bore capillary tube. So the best thing for me to do is once I get to the point where I want to know what the best charge is for it, is to charge it up, run it down to these low temperatures, get that coolant charged up, charged down, whatever, get it nice and cold, and it maintains real well. Say we're still at negative 1.7, but you see how well it holds. So what I can do is chill it down like it is right now, and go ahead and pull the charge out, evacuate the system, and then recharge it until it seems appropriate for the setup. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to go ahead and just shut the whole thing down completely and let it sit overnight. I expect it to hold pretty well for some time, and I'll probably check on it a little bit here in the morning. Shouldn't be opening the door up. So anyway, you have a good night.